we go live, we'll let you know about it. So I'm delighted to say we have Duncan McMath with us. He's the director of the new Ronaldo documentary. Duncan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, guys. How you doing?
How has the response been? You've put the film out into the public sphere. This, I guess, is the most slightly bit where you've got a bit of trepidation, where everybody starts to see the movie. What's the response been like so far?
Yeah, to be honest, fantastic. Yeah, just the comments coming in have just been very, very positive. I'm yet to read a negative one. so that's it's been really nice. But I'll be honest with you, it wasn't nearly as nerve-wracking as when we took the film to show Ronaldo. That was kind of the make or break moment, because although he didn't have editorial control, his opinion was obviously vital. And we'd agreed, obviously, that we'd take it into account. And we took it to show him a couple of months ago in London. He was filming a Nike ad for the World Cup, and we rented a cinema space, showed him the film. He turned up with a couple of his mates, his agent, his wife, his entourage, and we put the film. He said to me before, "I'm nervous." I said, "Oh, you're bloody nervous." I can't tell you, I'm quaking here, shaking. And we watched the film with him, and he came out in tears. And he looked at me and he said, "I can't even talk. I can't tell you how good it was." He said he cried 3 times, and the client was there and asked him if he wanted us to make any changes, and he said he wouldn't change a second. So, you know, that was the best review I'll ever get, I think.
Wow, that's class.
Yeah, that was cool. Yeah.
So this nervousness is totally fine. So walk us through that bit, will you? Where it's like the lights are going down, and are you looking at him? Are you just looking forward the whole time, going, "I'm not going to look at him, not going to look at him"? Can you hear him crying during the movie? Are you like, "Oh, is he crying because he hates it"? What's that bit like?
Yeah, no, whenever we've had these screenings, I sort of sit at the back and I like to watch people watching it. And yeah, you just want them to laugh at the right times, and be emotional at the right times. To be honest, the cinema was pretty dark, so I couldn't really see his facial expressions, and he had his back to me. But I mean, you could hear a pin drop throughout the 90 minutes, which is always a good thing. And I remember he's a real pro. He's a lovely guy, which I think comes across in the film. But he's a real pro as well. And we produced El Presidente, which is the 6-part series about him at Real Valladolid. And to start off with, you know, we hadn't sold the series to anyone. We went to him and his agents with the idea, and they basically said, "Listen, we'll open the doors, film it, let us see episode 1, and we'll make a decision." So again, that was quite nerve-wracking when we showed him episode 1, and we took it to Madrid to show him that. And I'll never forget that he walked, because we've shown the film and previous films and series to a lot of people, and the mobile phone is so frustrating. And if you're showing someone a film and their mobile phone is vibrating on the table, or they're kind of glancing at it every now and again, it's really off-putting as a filmmaker. And I remember we showed him episode 1 of El Presidente. He walked in, he sat down, he turned his phone off, put it upside down on the table, pushed it away from him, and he was glued to the screen for 40 minutes. And it was very similar when we showed him the film. You know, we just had his entire attention for that 90 minutes, and he loved it. And I'm gutted that I wasn't in Brazil for the premiere, because I'd love to have seen his mum's reaction as well. Because I don't know what you guys think, but I think, you know, she's a star, and you can see in the film where he gets his charisma and his sense of humor from, because she comes across brilliantly, and she's great in the emotional moments, but she's also very funny at the end when she talks about seeing him after winning the World Cup and asking him what the hell he's done with his hair. And you know, I'd love to have seen her reaction. That's another person I'd love to have watching the film.
Yeah, she's definitely one of the characters that stands out, Duncan, for sure. I mean, it's mad. Like, I was watching it last night, and the tension you've built from the very outset in terms of 98, and for people who maybe aren't familiar with the story, they will watch those opening scenes and be like, Jesus, this is incredible, because you realise how big football is in Brazil when, you know, I think there's one moment at the start where one of the Brazilian reporters gets the official FIFA team sheet, and he's like, "Turn that camera around so I can, you know, I need to tell the people of Brazil something." And this news that Ronaldo appears not to be in the starting 11, like, those moments must have been just quite it must have been quite incredible to get that footage, for starters.
Yeah, there's so much of that footage that when it came in, we were dancing in the editing suite. But I mean, that's part of the success of this documentary, that the hours and hours and hours of archive footage that we've watched, and there's obviously been a big team of producers working on this, a big team of archive producers from all over the world, and that's what's enabled us to get those kind of images that you're talking about. I mean, we looked at over 300 hours of archive footage. We've got this footage from 80 different providers internationally. We've looked at 2,500 different photos. There's a lot of pre-production that's gone into this. And as you say, when you're digging that deep, you do find absolute gems. And luckily for us as well, the South Americans, and especially in Brazil, football is so huge, and they've got that little bit of drama as well. You can't really imagine John Watson saying, "Turn those cameras on me, I want to speak to England." That comes with that kind of South American Latino kind of style of broadcasting, and definitely in moments like that, it was helpful.
Like there's deep moments as well where like, and that injury, that those moments where Ronaldo's in the hotel room with Roberto Carlos before that, on the afternoon of that 98 final, and he collapses, and he's clearly not well, and it emerges that he's had some sort of a nervous breakdown of sorts. But like, even when he's in modern day sitting there with Roberto Carlos, and they're kind of trying to reflect on what happened and all the conspiracy theories around it, one of the lines that really stood out was he's talking about the mental health of athletes, and he says we were like gladiators just thrown out into the arena, and that's something that really stood out to me, is they were just used, and Ronaldo was this global phenomenon, and he's just being used for his pure talent.
I totally agree, and that was really key, and I'm really pleased you said that, because I think there's a scene early on which I'm sure you'll remember because it's very impactful, when he comes out of an airport, and he's 21 at that stage. He comes out of an airport and he's absolutely mobbed by press, by fans. He can't move. He's got cameras in his face. He's got journalists, mics being shoved in his face. He's got fans singing 1, 2, 3, Ronaldo is our king. He gets bundled into a car, and then the car can't move because there's that many fans around him, and you can just hear them revving the engine, trying to get away. And for us, that's on screen for 52 seconds. And that was really, really important right at the beginning, because we've built up to this moment where he's the best player in the world, and you've seen him doing his thing at Cruzeiro, then at PSV, and then at Barca, and then at Inter. And then suddenly you see the impact of that fame. And I think for a lot of people watching, we've all worked with footballers for many years, and we know that it's not all glitz and glamour. But I think nowadays they've got it a lot easier than they did 20 years ago. I think probably Ronaldo was the prototype of the modern day superstar footballer. But at that stage, they didn't have the entourage around him to protect him. He didn't have the bodyguards. He wasn't protected. He didn't live in the bubble that the modern day footballers live in. And I'm not saying that it's not difficult nowadays, and I know that the pressure gets to players, but you don't see footage like that of the Cristiano Ronaldos, of the Messis. They're bundled into a car, taken to the back entrance, taken up into their hotel rooms. It's just not the same. And I wanted to make that was very important to me, because early on in the interviews with Ronaldo, we spoke about the pressure. And even the fact that, we call the film The Phenomenon, but actually when you watch it, he doesn't like the nickname. And early on, you hear him say, it was just added pressure that I didn't need at that stage. I was 21 years old. I just got to Europe, and people were calling me The Phenomenon, and the phenomenon can't fail, can't stop scoring goals. So the whole of part one of the documentary is very much a build-up of this pressure, just to show the level of pressure that are on these footballers, and especially on Ronaldo at that time at such a young age, and then the reason for what happened in 1998, which in itself was, I'm really pleased you enjoyed that scene, and we really enjoyed putting it together, because I don't think it's ever been put together kind of chronologically as we did before. But that was a real challenge, because obviously none of that footage exists. You hear all these stories of what could have happened the day of the 1998 final, and I don't know about you guys, but for years and years, I believed it was mind games. I really believed that it was Brazil kind of trying to mess with France before that final. And then you start hearing things about a fit, and then you start hearing things about illness and an injury, and you don't really know what to believe. But to hear Ronaldo basically say, as you've just said, that it was a nervous breakdown. It's really impactful, and it just shows the pressure that he was under at that young age.
Here's the thing, like, there's a good chance, as is documented in the movie, that like the redemption arc doesn't reach its proper conclusion, that he doesn't win the World Cup in 2002 because he's not even part of the World Cup squad because the people weren't managing his injury properly afterwards. Like, this could have been one of the great tragedies in sport, sporting tragedy obviously, as opposed to this incredible comeback story.
Yeah, absolutely. No. And that's what makes it such an incredible redemption story. I think if he'd have, if it wasn't for the injuries, if it's still an incredible story with just what happened in the fact that 6 hours before the World Cup final, this guy's being rushed to hospital, in itself is an incredible story. The fact that he kind of checks himself out of the hospital, tells them to drive him to the stadium, walks into the change room and says, "I'm playing," and Zagallo changes the starting 11 45 minutes before kickoff. It's that in itself is an incredible story, and the fact that they go on to lose and that he's blamed, etc., etc. But then the redemption story is even greater, and I think possibly the greatest in football and one of the greatest in sport, because of what happens afterwards, because of those injuries, and not just because he picks up an injury and gets better and then goes to the World Cup, but he picks up 2 back-to-back injuries. Experts in America are telling him, knee surgeons that are world-renowned are telling him that he'll never play football again. And not only does he play football again, he goes to the World Cup, he scores 8 goals in 7 games, he's a top scorer at the World Cup, and he wins Brazil's 5th championship. I mean, the story is incredible. I've always said from the start, like, I really wanted to put up, at the beginning of the film, I wanted to put up a graphic saying this is a true story, just to kind of reflect. It's not based on a true story. What you're about to watch kind of defies belief, because it is one of the greatest redemption stories of all time. I feel unbelievably fortunate and lucky to have directed it and to have worked with Ronaldo and worked with this story, because it's just something you feel like you couldn't script it. It feels like a Hollywood screenplay, and yet it's real, and you've got the protagonist from the time basically telling you the story. And that's one of the reasons as well that we wanted to use so much archive footage, because I wanted to just show that this is real, and then going back to the idea of putting this as a true story at the start of the film, which unfortunately the clients weren't too keen on. But just the fact that you're watching archive from the time that's telling this story, I really wanted it to be an immersive experience, that we use as much archive as possible, and you'll see very few talking heads. I think it's important to see talking heads at times because there's real emotion there, but they're never on screen for very long, because we wanted to throw you back into 1994 and then take you to 98 and then gradually kind of bring you on that journey with us from 1998 to 2002. And as you say, there's real tension, and Ronaldo kind of reflects that in his memories of that time. There's real tension as to whether or not he'll go to 2002. It's not made up, it's true. And you've got Scolari, the manager, saying that he thought that at the time there was a 95% chance that Ronaldo wouldn't make it. And then obviously last minute he does, and luckily for us and for the story and for Ronaldo and for the Brazilians and for football, he makes it in 2002, and the rest is history.
When you talk about the fact that it's kind of Hollywood and you've got your protagonist, Duncan, I guess a good Hollywood film needs its Cruella de Vil and Héctor Cúper. I mean, he's the bad boy, he's the villain of this entire film. And I think there's a point at which Ronaldo, I think, says he was the worst coach I ever had.
You're right.
And doing 4-kilometre runs at the start of each training session. He's not getting in the inter-team before that 2002 World Cup. He really comes across. And then there's, of course, the whole Argentina versus Brazil dynamic as well, and the rumours. But he comes across as a real villain in the movie, Héctor Cúper.
He does. We always talked about two baddies, 2 villains in this film, and one was the knee, and we really wanted to kind of reflect how frustrating that knee was, and that if it wasn't for that knee, and so many people have said that to me over the last few weeks and months, and just reading the comments on social media since the film went out, people saying, if it wasn't for that bloody knee, he would have been the greatest of all time. And I think that's probably very true, and I think he's right up there anyway, despite almost 4 years where he barely played. But yeah, the other villain is of course Hector Cúper, and you just those 4 years. You know, we always talk about this film as a film of contrasts, because with every up there's a down for Ronaldo during these 4 years. Everything until 1998 had been a kind of gradual journey of success, to the extent that he wins the Ballon d'Or at the age of 21, and he's going into the World Cup in 98 as the greatest player on the planet. And then suddenly you get what happens, the fit just before the final. Then you get the first knee injury, and the fact that in that first season back, Inter are quite poor and the fans are getting on their back. Then you get the second knee injury straight after that. And then after that, of all managers to come and take charge of Inter, you get kind of this defensive, very pragmatic manager that doesn't want stars in his team. And you just think, you know, when's he going to get a break, this guy? It's just bad news after bad news for Ronaldo until 2002. And then in the film, one of my favorite lines is when his mum says, and that's when the story started to change, when Ronaldo finally gets picked for the squad in 2002, because as a viewer, I wanted you to be able to relax at that point and think, okay, you know, we've spent sort of the last hour and a bit just being taken through this kind of this tension and this stress of what's been almost, like you said, almost a tragedy. And then just at the last minute, luckily, there's the success that comes from being picked and going to the World Cup and then winning it. But yeah, Hector Cúper's kind of is the last straw in that journey of tension and disaster. And it's just like, you know, crikey. Ronaldo could have got just about any other manager, and that last year before the World Cup would have just been a smooth ride. He'd have played plenty of games. He'd have been managed right, and he'd have, you know, got back into the World Cup squad without too much tension and worry. But in the end, you know, it's right to the wire as to whether he'll go or not, and that's certainly down to Hector Cúper, and we do build up that villain status that he has. I have to say as well that there is a line from Hector Cúper which helps me enormously, and certainly helps my guilt to set him up as the villain, because Hector Cúper himself says, you know, if being unpleasant to Ronaldo works, then, you know, that's fine with me. And you think, right, well, that's enough to set him up as a villain, I think.
Yeah, it definitely works. One last thing, the conspiracy theories about Nike forcing him to play and all that kind of stuff from '98. I know he's talked about it before, but as you say, you're the first kind of people who've actually done this whole thing chronologically and, you know, gone to the source himself. We can blow that conspiracy theory up now. Is that official, do you think?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's it's certainly not true. And I tell you what, researching this, and I don't know if you remembered and if you noticed, because at one stage during that conspiracy theories edit, there's a headline that comes up from a Brazilian newspaper that says Nike paid off Brazil, says Edmundo. And there was a time where Edmundo was recorded in a Brazilian bar telling a friend that he thought that Nike was behind the fact that Ronaldo ended up playing. And that obviously, that recording then got sold to the press, and that went massive in Brazil. But then, you know, that was recanted by Edmundo, and he kind of said, you know, I'd had a few drinks in a bar, and it meant nothing. And he was brought up in front of the court as well when Ronaldo was forced to go to, well, it was the Brazilian parliament and explain what happened. Edmundo was there too. And did at the time say that wasn't true, but that certainly didn't help. But no, I think there's absolutely no truth in it. And you know, when you're digging into these stories and you're interviewing journalists who were working on that story at the time, you know, the consensus is that why on earth would Nike want an athlete who's not well to go out and represent them? You know, it wasn't an image that Nike want to be associated with. Ronaldo losing the World Cup final and being ill and potentially being accused of making him play. You know, it doesn't make any sense from a commercial perspective, and definitely there was no truth in it. That scene though was quite funny. It was quite difficult to get Ronaldo to be serious, because he just kept talking about all these ridiculous conspiracy theories, and he was really laughing at the fact that, you know, he was telling about all these theories that he heard, and one of them was that, you know, that there was even an agreement between the Brazilian and the French governments that they would let Brazil win the World Cup in exchange for a certain amount of money. And you just think, crikey, there's nothing that people wouldn't say. And as Ronaldo rightly points out, it was the start of the internet. So any little theory was being published and people were reading it and believing it. And it's
imagine if Twitter had been around. Like
exactly. Well, he himself says it's the start of fake news. So
there you go. It all comes back to that. Last thing then, Duncan, if anybody else, so it was on BBC 4 already. If people want to go and see the film, what's the best place to get their hands on it?
It's on iPlayer. So that's where to get it in terms of on the BBC. It's on DAZN in other territories around the world, and it's on Globo in Brazil, which has been a huge success. But yeah, in the UK, it's on iPlayer.
Well, listen, you've done justice to the phenomenon. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. We wish you the very best of luck with it. Thanks a million.
Thank you guys very much.
It's Duncan McMath there, the director of the new Ronaldo movie. I think we need a VPN to watch iPlayer, do we?
I think potentially. You might get it in mono.
Or have they reduced the? Was there some kind of recent thing where they? Anyway, somebody in the comments will let us know about.
People will find a way to watch it.
8:38 this morning. OTB AM brought to you with Gillette in association with Movember Effortless Shave, Magnificent Mo. You can sign up or donate now at Movember.com.